What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at the public beta test, or public playtest really, for Starfinder Afterlight that is set to start tomorrow. Now, I'm bringing you this one day early, of course, because I was given early access to this playtest from Epic Tellers themselves, the people developing the game, and I actually also got access to it from a PR firm that talks to me sometimes. In this particular case, though, I had backed the game on Kickstarter at a level in which I was always going to get access to this, just so people are aware. But now let's talk a little bit about what this playtest actually encompasses. So to be very clear, it is not very long. Like all told, there's like maybe an hour's worth of content here. And so while we're going to discuss a few things, this isn't really the exact place to criticize every single little thing, like animations and stuff, all the things that are still like works in progress. Much of what they're doing right now is collecting feedback on how stuff works, the way it feels, etc. And so this is a long ways off after these playtests conclude. I believe they are shooting for an early access release first, and then that journey will take them to the 1.0 release. So if anything, this video and this bit of content you're seeing is very, very early. If you'd like to experience it for yourself, they're having signups over on their Steam page, and they are letting so many people in at a time as they, open this up to more and more people. So from there, let's actually talk a bit about what is available, what's to see, how things work, etc. So while character creation will come to the game eventually, as this is ultimately a CRPG set in the Starfinder setting, which is effectively Pathfinder, but much, much later on, and so operates as a bit of a sister TRPG, if you will, but obviously with a very different veneer and setting. However, the system should be relatively familiar to you, though it is the 2E version, which means we're going to be doing things like messing around with a 3-action economy. But before we do that, because there is no character creation, we have to pick one of 3 initially preset characters that show off the human, the Vesks, and the Shirin. The Shirin being the very insectoid-like characters that I think will be interesting to play. Each one of them representing a different class. However, because the demo itself is so short, there's really not too much to actually experience there in terms of like content and the way the class works, but you'll kind of get the idea of the basics at the very least. Now, you'll also pick a voice for these characters. They have one voice assigned for each of them for the sake of this playtest, and I actually do kind of want to start there. The voice acting of this playtest was very good, to the point where it kind of doesn't match the rough mock-ups of like everything else we've got going on. You can tell the voice acting seems to be much farther along in terms of development, which is probably not too surprising given that they've got Neil Newbon working on it, I know. But once you've picked out which character you would actually like to play as for this, you'll get dumped into the opening scene, where a space station gets destroyed. We get shuttled off in an escape pod. However, after crash landing on Akaton Station, which I am probably mispronouncing, we find out that it's actually been a while, apparently like 5 years since that happened, which doesn't make a ton of sense to us, as the escape pod we were in should not have lasted that long. But it's space and sci-fi, so there's plenty of reasons that could have gone wrong, let's say. And your immediate job is to start looking for your old captain, Captain Kali. And this is where we start running into characters pretty fast. First up, we meet Preach, another insectoid-like character that serves as one of our companions. Preach is going to help you get patched up from the initial crash, and then he's actually going to introduce you to your second companion, Sterling. Sterling is a Solarian, or people using, cosmic sorts of powers, and I will say that as of right now, Sterling in this little playtest was certainly the strongest character, in no small part because he actually has access to some of his abilities to make use of in combat. Now, the reason we're tracking Sterling down is because apparently he knows the location of Captain Kali and has spoken with her relatively recently. However, in order to, get to that part, we first have to help Sterling with a little problem of his. He is dealing with a cult of Urgathoa, or the goddess of the undead, which is probably the most interesting part of the demo in total, because there are like options and ways through that conversation that will change, of course, depending on what you decide to do, but the most likely option is to fight the crazy cult. And there we get a basic look at the combat system. Now, the combat system, again, 3-action economy as per Starfinder 2E, but what's in this playtest is a little bare bones because we don't have access to like all the different difficulty modifiers, the basics of abilities and things for each of the classes. And so the fights that are in the playtest here are pretty small and straightforward. You're mostly just attacking with basic weapons And the only guy who really has much going on is Sterling himself, who thanks to his Solarian powers has a little more going on, and you're able to make use of those, meaning that he feels a little better than the others by default, I would say. Now, with the 3-action economy, you are able to, basically use those 3 actions however you see fit. If you want to move with all of them, move and attack with all 3, that's all possible, but some actions cost more than 1 action, up to the maximum of 3. Like, for instance, a lot of spells will cost 2. So not too much to say about, whatever the depth of this winds up being, but the basics are there and, so far so good, I would say. Now, in terms of exploration and the overall art style and everything, it's looking pretty okay for the most part. Animations are very stiff. Some of the models are very stiff. That's more or less what I would expect given both the nature of this being a smaller developer via Kickstarter and also the fact that we are so early. But we also see some classic stuff in there, like, various skill checks that can be made, and the overall choice and consequence of all those things remains to be seen, but it's a promising start. We even get to take a look at things like inventory management and different items and how those might affect your stats and the like. But putting all of that together, mostly I would just say this playtest is very early, but it is looking pretty good. I enjoy the general vibe of it. The voice acting is already quite good. And so the basics are there, but until we see more and they start expanding upon what's available, it's hard to really say too much else. But this is a good start, and I'm excited to see how this shapes up. And as we move towards the beginning of their early access period, which should, of course, be bigger and a bit more interesting as a result. But I'm very interested in Starfinder games, so I'm going to be covering this throughout, and hopefully you enjoyed what you saw here. In the meantime, however, or if you're looking forward to that early access video, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, stick around for a little while, let me know how you feel about this one, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.